Hi. Welcome to Believe, a Ted Lasso podcast. I'm Julian.
I'm Tom.
And we are Team Binge. And you are here with us to discuss episode 2, season 1
Yes.
of Ted Lasso. If you're joining us for the first time, I would recommend listening to episode 1. That's where we broke down the first one. We are now on the second one, which is called Biscuits.
Yes.
So what we'll be doing once again is just going through the episode and talking about it. Really enjoyed this episode. I feel like pilots, the last one, are a lot of introduction, bringing in characters and doing those sorts of things. Episode 2, I felt like got a lot deeper into characters and plot.
For sure. I think, obviously, a pilot has a lot of weight to carry to get people invested in the show.
Right.
This one, to me, really opened it up and allowed you to see how Ted Lasso was successful in his previous job and kind of why he's here and how he can be successful with his team. You see glimpses of it.
Definitely. And this episode was directed by Zach Braff. We talked about this before, but the show's created by Bill Lawrence. Bill Lawrence also created Scrubs, so there's a connection. Zach Braff, for those of you that don't know, starred in Scrubs, directed and wrote a movie called Garden State, which a lot of people liked, kind of an indie film. I'm a huge fan of Scrubs. Tom has only given Scrubs 1 or 2 episodes, which is a point of...
1 or 2 seasons. I've dipped my toe in. I've watched
Okay, 1 or 2. Yeah. I'm mixing up seasons and episodes today, so that might get confusing as we go through this. But Zach Braff directed it.
Has he done a lot of stuff? Obviously, he did that indie movie, but did he do a lot of directing on Scrubs, or is this relatively new for him?
I know that he directed Scrubs. I know that he's very proud of the episode he's directed on Scrubs because he brings it up on his podcast, which I would recommend people listen to. It's pretty funny. But I know he's done more than Garden State in terms of movies. He's got several movies. I just have not seen them other than Garden State. The other thing I want to mention is written by the same kind of crew, Bill Lawrence, Jason Sudeikis, and then I made a mistake on the last one where I mentioned Brendan Hunt, who plays Coach Beard, and I made a comment like, I think they brought him back because he was in the original commercials. Well, not only was he in the original commercials, but he's a co-creator and co-writer.
Wow, okay.
Coach Beard is pretty involved in the making of the show, and his name being Brendan Hunt. So, second episode of the season called Biscuits. The things that they really get into are Ted Lasso's team building, his philosophy on getting everyone together, really focused on Rebecca, and her last name is Welton, the owner of the team. And then we also dive into Jamie Tart and Sam. I'm not going to attempt his last name. Do you want to attempt his last name?
I don't remember what you written down somewhere. Obisanya, yeah.
Thank you.
Nigerian soccer player.
So you would say I nailed it that time?
Better than last, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So starts out, it's their first official day as coaches. So opens up, they get up, and their flats are obviously right next to each other. They're in this quaint little village. I think it's a village. And they are making their way to essentially coach the team for the first day. Mm-hmm. I think what they do really well is they're establishing like how small the community is.
Right.
So there's people that they meet on the street, like the street performer that he listens to. And that's one thing that you love about Ted. Like Ted is just taking it all in, and he appreciates the street performer performing music, the kids playing soccer. That's what he watches, the school kids that are kicking it around. And like, are all these soccer teams, are they all tied to like small communities like that?
It kind of depends. So like when I was doing some research, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but there are so many tiers of soccer or football in England. So you have the Premier League, which is what this show is focusing on, which is the top tier. But what's very unique about English soccer, and I won't go too far into the soccer talk, but teams can either get promoted or relegated within these leagues. Okay. So if you are in the bottom of the table, or the league, if you will get demoted to the league prior or below. Okay. And if you win the league below, you can get promoted to the Premier League. So it's really cool how smaller teams can move up and down. But all that's to be said is there's so many different small towns and stuff within like London that house a lot of these teams, and where a lot of the footage is shot there for the show. So,
and like most of the teams are, I mean, in the same way, like we have a football team for our city. Like all these places are tied to, but they're not big cities, right? They're mostly small towns, or are they small parts of big cities?
I think they're smaller parts. So when they
and I'm asking Tom these questions because Tom is our resident soccer expert, or football if you're not from here. Go
Correct. I have a background and I played it when I was a youth.
I also played it when I was a youth.
I played it, I guess, youth plus. I continued to play. I think everybody in the States like plays soccer when they're kids, but I played it competitively and traveled and all
I
that
played
kind
when
of
I was a kid. People still talk about it. I still talk about it.
But so the training ground that this show is filmed, so where they do the training ground scenes, the practice, and all that kind of stuff, it's actually called Beaconsfield Road, and it's where Hayes and Yeading FC. And that was some of the little deep dive I did before because I wanted to know where that was because it's clearly a pretty decent sized training complex. But that's a Tier 7 football club. So like, again, it's a relatively small town, and I think it's
so
like part of like
three
West
people
London.
in order to be in Tier 7?
Apparently, it's part of the Ted Lasso hierarchy structure. I don't know.
Wonderful.
But I definitely do think they also have in England like they call them academies. So you think of it like a small like Chelsea academy has very young soccer players like in middle school, high school age that practice with kind of the Chelsea club, and they're wearing Chelsea gear and all that kind of stuff, and then can kind of potentially get promoted and play for some of the lesser leagues of the Premier League and stuff. So it's very interesting. But all that, again, is to say there is just a massive amount of soccer riddled throughout all little small towns. So we've got a small town relative soccer here in the USL, but there's just boatloads of them there.
Sure. And what you see as they are walking to work is like people playing it. They watch the kids play it, and then because some of these characters, you don't know this because you have not watched the other episodes.
Correct.
But the characters that he sees, they reoccur. They come back. So there's establishing early in the season that it's a small community rather than just a bunch of background players that we never see again. So then they get to the facility, and Ted walks in to Rebecca's office. And we see, very, very funny, we see Rebecca Welton is Googling her husband.
Did you pause it? I had to pause it and see all the different things.
Yes. So his name is Rupert. I don't know his last name, but his first name is Rupert. And so much, and we don't want to promote anyone, but let's just say a well-known search engine she's using.
Google.
What'd you say?
Google.
Yeah, that sounds right. Ask Google has got his name, and then it's auto-filling all the things. Did you write down the things that were auto-filled?
I did. A lot of it's just kind of the generic, like, how old is he, what's his net worth, all that kind of stuff.
Because he's a rich guy. He's a famous rich guy.
The one great thing that it kind of throws in there is, it kind of says, I don't know how we want to say.
Let's say body part. I guess width.
Width. There you go.
I mean, I think you could say girth.
Sure.
Girth is okay.
Yeah.
I mean, a girth is a term that I use every day to describe, I don't know, clothing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very funny that's like, and it's kind of, I mean, I don't know that I have it on my Google anymore, but when those autofills would come up, when they give you what like everyone else in the world is Googling. It would be like inevitably if you Googling, sorry. Inevitably if you ever looked up like a famous person, it would always be the famous person and then feet. And you got to wonder how many people are looking up people's feet.
Is that like is it literally like a foot fetish thing and it's just got enough searches?
That or people are buying famous people's shoes and sending them to them.
I'm not aware of this.
I mean, I've sent famous people's shoes before, but wow. So this introduces, as Ted comes into the office, Biscuits with the Boss, which is just a great premise, reoccurring thing that's happened. This is Ted. He brings her a box of biscuits, which are...
Biscuits are just cookies, right? It's an English cookie?
I think so, but it looks like cakes. Like, I know they call cookies biscuits, but what he delivers is like It's almost like a coffee cake or something like that. If anyone knows, send us a couple of boxes. We'll sample them.
Yeah, we'll eat them.
Be more than happy.
We'll eat random internet pastries.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. No. We won't check it at all. Just send it. Especially those people that left comments from the last one on our MySpace page. You know who you are. I'm not offended at all by what you said. Please send us pastries.
A lot of wankers.
A lot of wankers. So, and this is Ted, like, not being overbearing, but coming in and trying to make a connection with her. She's very standoffish. He starts asking her, like, questions to get to know her. Mm-hmm. And so he's asking her, and his opener is, first concert, best concert. Yep. To which she responds,
The Spice Girls. And the Spice
Girls. And his is Kenny Rogers, the gambler. I don't think they get to best. I think he just gets to first before she...
I think in the later scene, he comes back and then says what his best is. And that's where he says Beastie Boys. And does that a little bit. So, yeah, it continues later on when he sees her in the office.
Right. And she tells him she just does not have time for him. But he is relentless in his pursuit to make friends. Tom, what was your first concert?
I was going to say, we're going to ask each other. My first concert was...
No, I'm just going to ask you.
Just me, okay. Crew Fest. It was a Motley Crue concert. It was Motley Crue, Papa Roach, and Trapped, I think. Very fun time.
That says a lot about you.
Yeah. I was going for Papa Roach. I was like one of the first CDs.
Motley Crue and those other two, I don't really find a connection. Was it like... they were the headliner?
Motley Crue was the headliner, yeah. I think they were just more or less rock bands kind of a thing. I mean, Crue's obviously very old, so they're not going to be able to find a lot of like older bands to tour with them.
It's because they're all dead.
Yeah, but they were. I mean, they did all their hits. But it was a fun show.
Okay, and the middle one was Papa Roach.
Papa Roach. That was the reason I went. I'm a big Papa Roach fan. That was the first CD I ever bought.
Tom, I have not known you this long, but I can tell you that Papa Roach was the only album you ever played when we were. If we knew each other when we were young, that would have been the only CD you would have played. You played it a lot. I remember it distinctly.
Great album.
I know you thought so.
And yours? What was yours?
Ooh, this is going to tell a lot about me.
Spice Girls?
My first concert was a band called Third Day, which is a Christian band. And I would say this is my first concert that I chose to go to. Okay. That like I wasn't just taken to by my family. And it was Third Day. Got some great albums. They're like, I don't even know how to describe them, but
are they still around?
I don't know. Maybe they could be. No one. Well, I actually do think they still make music, but I obviously have lost track of them.
We'll have to check them out on MySpace.
Yes, they do. I'm sure still have a Pure Volume page. So she tells him, "Hey, I don't have time for biscuits with the boss." She does like we should point out she really likes the biscuits.
Oh yeah, just flips out. Has that first bite.
Her reaction is vulgar, and his reaction on his face when she says her thing was great. He's like surprised by how vulgar, but he's certainly glad that she enjoyed the biscuits. She tells him she doesn't have time for it. He says okay, and she's like, "You're going to be in here tomorrow morning, aren't you?" And he's like, "You bet I am." High fives the tree and leaves.
I got to high five more things when I exit rooms because that was just fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's a great thing. And then I started thinking as I watched that about the person that plays the actor that plays Rebecca Welton. So I looked her up because I didn't think I had seen her anything else.
Nor did I.
The actress's name, and I'm going to look here, is Hannah Waddingham. And you are a big Game of Thrones fan.
Yep.
And I know you know this now, but who did she play in Game of Thrones?
So she played Septa, one of the nuns. Did you know her actual name?
I could look it up, but I'm going to go with it. Septa is her name.
Septa 7. But yeah, so she was one of the kind of septas or priestess in the church there in Game of Thrones land.
Wasn't she the main one that shames...
Yes.
Cersei.
So she takes her down like the little shame road and stuff, and then it was ringing the bell the whole way through. But I think one of the things that kind of came out later is towards the end, I guess Game of Thrones spoilers. But Cersei.
Oh, that's a good point. Game of Thrones spoilers.
I said it.
We're doing it anyways.
Yeah, listen, if you haven't watched Game of Thrones by now, you're probably not going to watch it. So
I only read the books.
Yeah, well,
I've actually watched the show too.
Because if you read the books, you're still not there because the books aren't done. But anyway, so she goes through this like really heavy like waterboarding torture scene in that. And apparently there were articles and stuff that came out relatively recently that said like that was like the most excruciating acting she's ever done in her life because they were literally waterboarding her.
Oh, she got waterboarded.
Yeah, because she was the one, they're like holding a cloth over her, and it was just like crazy difficult. And I couldn't believe they made her, that main actress, do all this kind of stuff. You figured they'd have a stunt double get waterboarded.
Patriot Act, man. You're allowed to do anything. Patriot Act.
She's back in London now, so they have different rules.
So, yeah, that's true. Unless she shows up over here. And then that scene ends, and they do the introduction for the first time, because I don't think they did the intro in the pilot episode.
Intro for
the show itself.
Oh no, they did.
Did they?
Yeah, where he's in the seats and stuff like that.
Yes.
And then it's changing to Ted Lasso, the colors of the seats. Yeah, that's in the first.
Okay,
episode.
I'm gonna bet $5, because this is what friends do, that in the pilot episode they do not play the intro music and the guy sitting. You could hold us accountable to this. I'll hand Tom $5, because I feel like I watched this episode and I was like, oh, that's a cool intro. And the intro is him sitting in the seats that are all blue, because Richmond is a blue, their color is blue, and then the seats all turn red. It's almost like he showed up and people changed allegiance, right?
Ooh, okay, yeah.
That's how is that not how you interpret it?
I didn't think that far into it, but I like that. I like that interpretation.
How long did you watch the intro for?
I mean,
how many times did you watch the intro?
Twice. The first episode and this episode. Twice. Again,
I see what you did there, and I don't like it, because I don't think you've seen it twice. I think you've seen it once. But no, I think the thing is, like, he sits down in the blue chairs, and it's like a wave of red. It spells out Ted Lasso, but I think the idea is he's unpopular, and so people are, like, the colors are...
A lot of stadiums...
Like, there's a bunch of Democrats, and then Ted Lasso sits down, and then a bunch of Republicans show up. That's how I took it. Because I'm pretty sure their political parties over there are the same as ours, right?
That has to be. They're definitely not. But I think a lot of stadiums have that, though. Like Chelsea or all these big stadiums. Like, it'll say...
Chairs that change colors?
Not that change colors, but, like, the name of the club in the seats in a different color. So, like, seeing that... Not necessarily the transformation, I like that idea, but a lot of stadiums have that idea of letters and words being
The colors
spelled
aren't
out.
all the same. The chairs aren't, I'm sorry.
All the same colors.
The colors aren't all the same chairs.
Correct.
That's a better sentence.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick with that one. So, the theme song. Song sounded familiar to you.
Super familiar, and I'm a big fan of this band as well, Mumford & Sons. So I think it's just...
They say they're the Papa Roach of England.
It's true. Are they English?
They sound English. They sound like they're from medieval times.
They're from one of the United Kingdoms. As we already established, we know all four of them.
I still don't know the four. I'm ashamed.
It's Wales, Scotland, Ireland, Britain.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. I did that just for a joke. I knew those two.
Yeah.
I could name them again right now.
But yeah, so I know you've got a little bit more on, but I think it's Marcus Mumford, if I have that right. Like, he's one of the main lead singers, and I think he's the one that wrote and composed and obviously performed this song for Ted Lasso.
Right.
I didn't listen to the lyrics. The lyrics like sentimental to the show, or did they kind of say anything about the show? Did you?
I was too busy watching seats change color. Okay. I have no idea what any of that.
We'll get that for episode 7.
Yeah. So then we get through the intro. It's Beard and Lasso on the pitch, the training field, watching training. You can tell Ted is nervous. He's like shaking out his hands, and they establish in their walk to work that they both have first day jitters, is what they call it.
Yep.
And so they have this very funny exchange where Ted says something about Coach Lasso says something about look at that player in his cleats, and Coach Beard corrects him because cleats are not called cleats; they're called
boots.
Which leads to, and I was trying to talk about this on the first one, but I didn't give a good example, is Ted and Beard, Lasso and Beard have this thing where they go, and I'll just give the line.
Yeah, read it.
He says, so if I get fired from my job where I'm putting cleats in the trunk of my car...
You get the boot from putting the boots in the boot. Great boot work.
Great boot work, yeah, incredible. So that's like a running thing that they do with each other. They even do it later on in the episode.
Yeah.
But it's just a very funny exchange between them. I enjoyed that completely. And then we watch Jamie Tart school Sam Obisanya leave him in the ground, and then he kicks a goal, and then he starts taunting Sam. You watched that soccer. As you watched that soccer, were you like, oh man, these guys are World Cup bound?
I have to admit, the first episode was not very blown away by the soccer and the moves and whatnot, but like,
agree to disagree.
I went back and watched this a few times because like Tart put on a pretty decent move there. Like I don't know what it's called, but the way he got around Obasanya, and then that shot. The shot was a wicked shot. It was top corner.
Sure.
It had a little knuckle on it. Like that was a legitimate
shot. A little
shot.
knuckle. This is good. Yeah. Can I use that term now? It had a little knuckle on it.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know what it means, but I'm going to use it.
He swazed it.
Okay, that's you're adding like more confusing terms to define a term. This is like when your kid asks you what a difficult word means and you use another difficult word to define it, and then you have to talk to your kid for 3 hours and it's terrible. That's what you just did there.
But yeah, so knuckle or swaz, another term for it. More or less, you got no spin on the ball, so you don't know what's going to happen to it. But that ball just goes top shelf, top corner.
Is it like a knuckleball? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's literally a knuckleball.
For the Americans out there, it's like a knuckleball, where it just kind of, we all know what a knuckleball is.
Yeah. But again, very impressive. And kind of zooming in, you can't tell for sure, but it definitely looks like
I think
it
it's
is that actor hitting that ball.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's
He's
that
got some
actor.
skill.
And I read somewhere or heard somewhere that they shot, for this first season, they shot all the soccer in like a couple of days. So like, obviously they're not like, shows are not shot in like scene order.
Yeah.
But what they did for the show is they did all the like soccer action, the games, the practices or the training. They did those all together, and someone mentioned that actor that plays Jamie Tart actually has some soccer skills.
It makes sense. I mean, you see those hips. Like, there's just a perfect size hips.
Okay, yeah, I didn't notice the hips, but...
That was a reference to the later line with the, he's like, I feel like we're a band.
Oh, yeah. Narrow hips.
Mick Jagger, narrow hips, I get it.
So, not only does Jamie score the goal, he leaves Sam in the dust. Sam's upset. Instead of, Jamie being Jamie, he walks over and taunts him, which then gets involved. I think he's my favorite character, at least one of my top 10 in the show.
Tart?
Roy Kent. Comes in and calls Jamie a name, picks Sam up. Like, he's clearly a leader, and he's looking out for the younger players. Jamie doesn't need anyone to look out for him, it would seem. And so picks him up, and then we have Ted bring Sam over to give him a little bit of coaching, because Sam is clearly...
he's down.
He's down, yeah, having a rough day. And he tells him to be what?
To be more like a goldfish.
A goldfish.
And the look on his face is like just utter...
He looks like a goldfish when he's looking at him. Like, just big, like staring at him.
Big eyes, doesn't know what to do. But yeah, the idea of like goldfish only having a 10-second memory, which, is that accurate? I know it's kind of like a general...
No. As someone who regularly reads medical journals on goldfish...
Goldfish Weekly.
Yeah, Goldfish Weekly. I'm here to shatter everyone's T-shirts that they have about being a goldfish, all that merch out there. Goldfish have memories that last 5 months, folks.
Wow.
So, not true.
But it's a great anecdote for the show, because again, the idea, I think he talks to Nate a little bit about it too, about him like being more down on himself, and that Obasanya's character, like as a player, is more down on himself. So I think Ted thinks like this is a good way for him to just, you can't always think about what happened in the past. You got to focus on the present and what's going on in the future.
Yeah, and I know you're not familiar with it, but in American football, they say this a lot about like quarterbacks. Like if they throw an interception.
What's that?
So an interception is when...
Moving on.
Okay. So they say that about like just like forgetting about that play and moving on, having short memories, essentially.
Being goldfish.
Being goldfish. And after Sam departs, that's when Nate and Ted have the exchange. And he's like, hey, what's the deal with Sam? And Nate says, well, since he joined the league, he's been struggling. And Ted assumes it's him being homesick, which may be a little bit of projecting, because you can kind of tell Ted is homesick during this.
For sure.
A little bit. Once again, not a medical or mental doctor in any way, but I'm diagnosing Ted with homesickness. And he makes this joke, and I'm going to get it right. To Nate, he says, because Sam is down, he says, we will have to Nigeria him up. A play on Nigeria.
Yes.
And Nate starts laughing. And Ted goes, so you're still laughing at jokes that aren't funny. And Nate just like stops laughing. He goes, I'm not always sure what's a joke and what is it. And Ted goes, yeah, it's tough to tell these days, which is just a great exchange.
Yeah, and like Nate's acting, I think, or the actor is just fantastic in that because it's just such a great like kind of fake forced laugh. Like you can just tell this guy's done this throughout his whole life. Right. It's very, very convincing, but of course Ted picks up on it.
Yeah, Ted picks up on his lack of genuine humor. So then we are done with training, and we have Higgins and Rebecca walking through the facility talking. She has just watched a viral clip of Ted doing his dance, which is just so fun and infectious.
Yep.
And she realizes she hired him to make this team bad, but she's realizing everywhere he goes, people love him. She sees it with him trying to, like, befriend her.
Yeah.
She calls him relentless and nice, and she says it as an insult, essentially. And so she's complaining to Higgins, and she says the only thing that could muck this up, meaning him driving the team into the ground, is if like the players learn to love him and somehow his plan works, which is so. She is now, you can kind of tell she's establishing more that she needs to do something to sabotage his attempts at bringing the team together. The other big thing here is she asks Higgins to find out who makes the biscuits that Ted is delivering to the office every time. The other thing I think is funny is she goes, Higgins, who has the most sway in the locker room? And Higgins, who's the head of football operations, does not have any idea. And she like calls him worthless, essentially.
Like, super helpful.
And then what I thought was funny is they're in the doorway as the team is coming through. She says hi to him. Jamie and a couple of the players like don't even acknowledge her existence or Higgins' existence. Higgins like tries to high five him, and then the last two people I think are Sam and Roy Kent both like say hi to her and call her Miss Welton. So just kind of, I don't know, little things that show like respect, I guess, for the organization, for the ownership, and then the people that don't care, like Jamie, who only cares about himself. This leads us to the locker room prior to the game with
Crystal Palace.
Crystal Palace, which is a real
football
team. Football club. Real football club.
FC.
Yep.
They are a real team. And it was kind of interesting, too, because I said in the last pod that I assumed AFC Richmond was kind of more or less a placeholder or taking over for Crystal Palace because the game that they actually play, and they say it's a home game, takes place at Crystal Palace's stadium.
Oh, okay.
So when I first saw that, I was kind of like, oh, that's why they're just going to be Crystal Palace. But no, Crystal Palace does exist in this, English Premier League universe. So that was kind of interesting.
Got it. Okay. So then we're in the locker room. Ted gets the team's attention. Really, Beard gets the team's attention. I love it. Like, Beard surprises him because he yells, and then, like, Ted gives him a look like, thanks, coach. Like, all right. So aggressive. He asks Beard, what should they know about Crystal Palace? And he responds with...
A lot of speed on the outside. A lot of speed.
What
does
that mean?
Anything else?
What does that mean?
A lot of speed. It's just great. I mean, it's more or less just probably saying they're like either their forwards or their midfielders that generally are going to go on the outside. They're fast. So they got real fast players on the outside. So they'll probably play a lot of balls to the outside and then try to cross them in for goals.
Okay. As opposed to a lot of speed on the inside. If I was to say a lot of speed on the inside, would I ever say that, or how would that apply?
Yeah, you have certain players that like to play more inside, like a lot of like not power forwards, but like forwards that are more like bigger guys and stuff like that. They'll try to just own the inside. A ball will kind of come into them, and then they'll try to play the ball back, move around, and stay inside and try to get a goal. Okay. They're not the ones that are going to go on the edge and try to cross the ball because they're like the Jamie Tarts. They're not going to be the guy that crosses the ball. They're going to be the guy that's in the middle trying to score.
Got it. Okay. Then Ted mentions, hey, you beat these guys earlier in the season.
Yeah.
So they must be mid-season.
We are mid-season.
They're mid-season. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm sorry. I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, they mentioned at one point, I think they're like 13th in the league, and obviously I did look that up. There are 20 teams in the Premier League. You play 38 games, so obviously you can't play yourself.
That was a question from last pod. We got a ton of comments about it. People had no idea how many teams were in the Premier League. They came to us for answers, and we came to our resident expert, and our resident expert, who originally said there were 36, because they play how many games?
Nope.
How many teams were there, Tom?
I originally said like 16, I think, because I said there were 38 games.
Oh, that's what it was.
We played 38 games, and not realizing that the math wouldn't work because you can't play yourself if it's not being 40. There are 20
In this
teams.
day and age, math is whatever you want it to be, my friend.
It's true. You really change math?
I mean, I've seen The Incredibles 2 where he says that math changes, but I don't help my kids with their homework. I have a smart
we'll get
wife
to that.
does that. So they're not going to change the game plan because they've already beat Crystal Palace.
Yep.
And you can almost see Roy Kent, like they flash to Roy Kent, and he's like a little bit aggravated that Ted is not necessarily not taking it serious, but like not adding anything to the game plan. That's how I took it, at least.
I don't know if you, in Roy Kent's situation, you don't want him coming in and saying, this is our game plan. We're going to change this forward. We're going to change our formation, all that kind of stuff. You wouldn't want him doing that,
sure.
I think. So I would almost think that him just saying, just kind of keep doing your thing, I'm still new, I'm still more or less observing this team, because they clearly know he doesn't know the game.
Sure.
So if he were to change the formations, I feel like Ken would be more pissed about that.
I think you and I have different like leadership philosophies. Like you, just based on comments you said, or like kind of get the feel for the locker room, get the feel for the players, let them do their thing, and me, I'm coming in, I'm establishing right away. Like,
dominance.
Everything that was working before, I'm going to change. Just to show them who the new manager is. And I'm going to make them call me Mr. Manager. So then...
That's an entirely different show.
Ted does this thing where he says, and I love this line, he says something like, if the internet has taught us anything, then like anonymous comments are great, or I'm butchering the line.
I don't remember that line.
Well, ultimately what he's bringing out is anonymous suggestion box.
Oh, the box.
Yeah, the box. So he brings out a anonymous suggestion box. This is his attempt to team build. He says, hey, if there's anything wrong with, whatever, the locker room, any of those things, leave it in the box. It's anonymous. Mm-hmm. They gave the chore to Nate to get a box, and we find out that his nephew or niece has bedazzled it, so it's like a super fancy box. And Nate says, oh, my niece loves crafts, and he says, I love pictures into your personal life.
Yeah.
Which is just great.
That's one thing about the show, too, is like you can watch it multiple times, and I have watched this episode twice in preparation for this pod, and like some of those jokes, they come so fast from Ted, because he's just kind of like, it's his mind working, and these are observations that he is not, like a lot of us just keep it in our head. He'll just say it out loud, and it's not mean, it's not anything, it's just literally that observation. And I think Tart does a little bit later about the Panda lion thing that we can kind of talk about, which is just really funny, his observations and stuff that he throws out.
So they put out the suggestion box, and this is where Roy gets into it a little bit, or at least you kind of see more of his displeasure, is he comes up to Lasso and he says, we're middle of the table, lost 3 of the last 4, and you want to know if the snacks are tasty enough. And it's so much funnier in a British accent, in an angry British accent, than what I just did. And then Ted goes, are they?
Are they?
And then Roy storms off, and then Jamie sidles up, and he's like, they are not. And then it's just a great, like, just the timing, the way they move around. It's great. I laugh at most of the things that Roy Kent does and says throughout the episode.
I want to mention one thing, too, before we leave this scene. I did a little bit of deep dive on this, because it's very prominent. I saw it in the last episode, but I see it a lot in this episode, is they have this Latin phrase that is next to their logo. It's in their locker room, and it's kind of riddled all over the place. Did you notice and see this?
No. Next to Richmond Football Club's, Richmond FC's logo.
It's AFC Richmond, too, by the way. We were saying it wrong in the first episode. It's AFC, which is like Association
what does the
Football
A
Club.
stand for?
I think it's Association. It's like a more generic term.
Does it stand for American by chance?
No, it's not American.
American Football Club, Richmond? Because Richmond, we have Richmonds out here.
Richmond, we do. Richmond actually
we have a lot of Richmonds.
It is a small town or city outside of London.
Okay.
I did notice that.
I'm familiar with London.
Yeah, okay.
London is like our New York.
But I don't speak Latin, but I believe it says Gradarius Firmus Victoria. So I kind of looked this up because, again, it seemed to be very featured in this episode, and I was trying to figure out what this stood for.
I had no idea I was going to learn Latin tonight, and I am excited. I'm sorry, this morning.
Well, yeah, whenever we're potting. You probably won't, because apparently the Latin is really bad. I literally did a deep dive on this. Some dude wrote like a 7-page essay on this whole like phrase, and I didn't read all of it, but I skimmed it, and it more or less loosely translates to "firm hand guides us to victory," or you could also read that as like taking small steps to victory, or slow and steady wins a race, which I think is kind of interesting with what you're seeing so far with this episode and how Ted is treating the team or handling the team, where he's taking a slow and steady approach. And again, I don't know how this season ends, if he turns Richmond around or if it still struggles and stuff, but I thought that was kind of very interesting because it was featured so prominently. But again, that Latin is apparently very bad based on the internet.
Well, I would say slow and steady wins the race sounds better in Latin than if they just had the phrase slow and steady wins the race on all of their logos. I think most things sound better in Latin. You don't know this about me, but I have slow and steady wins the race tattooed on my body.
Wow.
But now that you've said this, maybe I'll get it also done in Latin on the opposite body part from what it... Never mind.
Learning so much again. I didn't see this in the airport bathroom.
So then we cut from that, and we see Ted walking back into the clubhouse, and he opens the door. He sees someone down the hallway, and this is just such a great gag. Mm-hmm. He opens the door, and then he stands next to the door, and Jason Sudeikis, if you just watch his face, does such a great job of... He's looking everywhere. Like,
yeah.
I think that, I didn't count it off. Did you count it off? It's probably 10 seconds.
Yeah, at least.
Which, of a show that is only, 30 minutes long, it's like a long joke. He's standing with his door open, holding it open for someone. You don't know who it is, and he is just awkwardly standing. And I feel like we've all, well, if you're polite, you've been in this situation before. Yeah. If you're a jerk that doesn't hold the door for people, then you've never been in this situation. But eventually find out it's Rebecca. She comes through the door. She says something like, "Ted, that was a really long time to hold the door." And he says,
"I respect you didn't hurry."
Which is such a great line. I respect that you didn't hurry. Which says, like right there, says a lot about where their relationship is at. Like he's trying. Mm-hmm. He's trying to be respectful. He's trying to be nice. And the fact that she didn't hurry up. Like we've all done it. Someone holds the door and all of a sudden you find yourself sprinting towards the door because you're like, I don't want that person to hold that door forever. Yeah. Are you a door holder?
Oh yeah. I'm a jerk.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I know you're not a jerk, but
no,
I guess
do.
We equate those things.
I do. I like the same kind of thing. I would do something similar. Like if I saw somebody kind of coming that's far away, you can kind of do that move where you see them coming, but you feel like they're too far away. I'll just push the door open a little bit harder.
Sure.
So as I'm
Sometimes
going,
it hits and
hopefully
swings.
they can catch it by the time.
Then they catch that door.
But what I love most, and you mentioned it, like the framing of the scene is just so great. How it just shows
him,
yeah, Ted opening the door and just the front of his face and him holding the door, so you have no idea. It's just really brilliantly done.
Right, and just the looks he does on his face. I encourage anyone to rewatch it. He's just perfect. Like where he's looking, how awkward it is. No words are said.
Nope.
Like it's great. And so. They have that exchange at the door. Keely, Jamie Tartt's girlfriend, pulls up in a sweet car. I'm going to guess it's a Maserati. I have no idea. All British cars look cool. And she pulls up and she immediately asks, "Would you rather be a lion or a panda?" And without missing a beat, Rebecca goes, "I don't have time for this." and walks up and Keely goes, she's like, "Okay." Like, that was rude.
Yeah.
And so they then have the conversation of lion or panda, and Ted goes with...
He goes with panda. And I would imagine, he doesn't say it explicitly, but you got to imagine Ted Lasso is a panda in that situation, right? Like, more of like a cuddly bear he's still a bear. He could still maul you and attack you.
Do pandas maul people?
Sure, they're bears. Pandas are still...
Have you ever seen... If I Google panda mauling someone on the internet, which I encourage everyone to do with your children in the room... Do you think I would see a video of a panda mauling a person?
Yeah, pandas are wild animals, then they're still a bear. They're going to... I mean, they're not carnivorous, so they're not going to eat meat, because I think they just eat bamboo and leaves, but they'll still protect their young, man.
I recently heard by a very important person that pandas are fat, lazy, and have pea-stained fur.
And no kung fu.
That wasn't her line. I was quoting Rebecca Welton. But that's true. I guess they're frightening if they do know kung fu. That's fair. So then they're having a conversation about Panda or lion. Ted chooses Panda.
No context, by the way. You have no idea.
No context, which is great.
Yeah.
And it kind of establishes like the relationship of Keely and Ted, that she would be willing to like shout that at him in a parking lot. I rarely shout questions at people in parking lots, other than will you hold the door or will you walk faster?
Will you jump my car battery?
Oh man, don't get me started. 110 degrees outside and you're just sitting in a parking lot waiting. Actually, someone did try and jump it, but it didn't work. So then Rebecca's re-engaged. She hears Ted pick Panda, and she's like offended. She's like, lion all the way. Lions murder people. Lions are the king of the jungle. Ted's like, what about an elephant? Can I be an elephant? And Keely's like, no, it's Panda or lion. And what's just so funny is Rebecca is like revolted by the fact that he wouldn't choose. And you kind of wonder if that's like, if she's putting on a show, if she's just got to do that, or if she's like that type of person that is like, I guess, type A personality that needs to be a lion. Like maybe she just needs to be because of the situation she's in.
I think so. I think she's definitely that kind of personality that she's not just going to let that kind of go. She wants to make sure everybody knows that she's a lion. I think that's maybe some of it too. She wants to make sure people understand where she's coming from. Not necessarily, because she clearly doesn't care about the conversation, but she wants people to know I am a lion.
Right. And so she walks off. I think Ted and Keely are both like, yeah, she's a lion. And Keely makes some comment about that tall woman is very intimidating, which you do see her on screen, and I constantly think, how tall is she? And so I looked it up. The actress is 5'10".
Okay, that's pretty tall.
But I feel like, so you know in American football, you're familiar with American football.
Correct.
Or American basketball, the players like exaggerate their heights.
Oh yeah.
Like
with your cleats on, your 2 more inches.
Sure. So I think maybe with actresses, they like de-height themselves because there's probably not a ton of parts for tall women, I guess.
Yeah.
So while she's listed at 5'10", I'm going to say realistically she's probably 6'7", and could play for the Milwaukee Bucks.
So she acts at 5'10", but she like plays at like 6'7".
No, I think her actual height is 6'7", but she's listed at 5'10".
Okay.
I guarantee she can dunk in American basketball. I don't know what the hoop height is for English basketball. So then Jamie Tart comes out while they're having this conversation, and just a great exchange. Do you want to take this, or do you want me to take this?
Yeah, so Jamie comes out, and again, Ted asks the same question, like, are you a panda or are you a lion? And of course, Jamie, just not seemingly understanding the hypothetical, just immediately says, Coach, I'm me. Why would I want to be anybody else? Which is just great. And again, Ted's line that it's if you blink and you miss it, but he comes back and says, I'm not sure you realize how psychologically healthy that actually is.
Right.
Which is just so great. Like, I literally had to stop and think about like what he said, and like, yeah, that is. Like, he sees himself. But clearly, he has some sort of mental issue where he can't. He's so ingrained in himself. He thinks about nobody else. I don't want to be somebody else. I don't want to be a panda.
Sure.
I am me. I am Tart.
Well, that's funny. Like, we spend so much of our lives, like, wishing we're someone else or wishing we had this. Jamie is so, like, confident in himself, or so, I guess, what he feels like fulfilled. He's like, why would I be anyone else? I'm me. I'm wearing this icon hat in this sweet tracksuit, and he's got that crossbody fanny pack. Yep. I don't know if it's a fanny pack that he's just wearing crossbody, or if those are things.
It's a thing. I think that's coming back.
The only time I've ever seen a grown man wear a pack like that is on the Frisbee golf course. That's the only time I've seen someone doing that. But that person could wear the hell out of that Frisbee golf bag.
It's called disc golf, but I mean, if you want to get technical.
Okay, that's what they call it in
England. Yep.
And what's so funny is Ted says that line to him about how psychologically healthy it is, and then Jamie, because he's English, goes cheers.
Yeah, I don't know if I got this. And then he says, "What is Ted?"
So Jamie says cheers to leave, like as a goodbye, because that's what they say, and Ted says night court. So I had to look this up.
Okay.
And it's once again, it's one of those jokes you'll miss if you're not paying attention. So he says, cheers. Ted responds with night court. So this is an NBC Thursday lineup, the TV shows. Oh. So Cheers, obviously a well-known sitcom, like a cherished and beloved sitcom. There was also another show that ran either before it or after it in the Thursday on NBC, and it was called Night Court. So he says cheers, they say Night Court. I went on a Reddit thread, and there was a Reddit thread about how this joke was done on Community because John Oliver says cheers, and then one of Abed says mash, and then no, Jeffrey Winger says cheers, Abed says mash, and then John Oliver says Faulty Towers, and which is like a British sitcom. So it was done on Community first. It's probably done on The Simpsons first, but that's another story.
That's funny because I didn't get that. I didn't realize I still equate cheers because again I know some English thing. Like I use cheers occasionally at work with people. So when I heard that, I didn't think of the show. So when he says Night Court, I'm like, that just came out of nowhere. So I didn't even think about it until you just said that.
So at your podcast job, you say cheers to people?
Yeah, cheers, man.
Okay. Well, that's cool. And this leads us to Keely and Ted talking, and Rebecca from her Rolls Royce does the window roll down bad guy,
like the Cruella de Vil kind of thing, right? She's just like slowly brings the window back up as she's plotting. She might as well be doing this with her fingers like the Burns.
Oh, exactly.
George Burns. Not George Burns. George Burns, what's his name?
Yeah, George Burns. From Bailey's and Loan. Yeah, from the Christmas Story.
Ken Burns.
No, Ken Burns is Civil War documentary, dude. Mr. Burns. Monty Burns.
Okay,
yeah.
Good.
Mr. Burns.
You already referenced
if
Simpsons.
you know him well enough to use his first name, I have my doubts about you. I refer to him as Mr. Burns.
Excellent.
And Smithers. Keely, I had to look her up because every time she's come on screen, I've thought, I know her from something.
Turns out, did a lot of research in the last episode to go back and look at the locker pictures to make sure that those were all Keely, which, spoiler alert, they all were Keely.
I told you in secret that I did a lot of...
On the pod.
Yes. So, that's pretty much secret. So Keely, yes, and I was wrong. Forgive me, Jamie. I owe Jamie an apology.
Yeah.
I assumed he was the type of dirtbag that would have a girlfriend and then a bunch of other women's pictures in his locker room.
He's a stand-up tart.
A stand-up tart. So Keely Jones, every time I see her, I think I know that actress from something. It turns out I do not know that actress from anything. Her name is Juno Temple.
Sounds like a familiar name, like a good actress name, Juno Temple.
Juno Temple, sure. But I looked at her IMDb page. There was nothing that jumped out at me.
I think she's kind of one of those is it like Jessica Chastain and Bryce Dallas Howard? Like they're just two actresses that look very similar. I think she has a doppelganger that's a famous American actress.
Okay, so do you know who the doppelganger is?
No idea. No
Okay.
idea. But I feel like I should do some research.
No. This is what an audience is for. Please find out who her doppelganger is. Send us MySpace messages with the doppelganger. No answer is wrong, by the way.
No answer is into touch.
No answer is into... Oh, good for you.
And by the way, this is the second episode. Our second episode of our podcast. The second time we've given our audience homework.
Yeah, but they love homework.
But they love it. That's why they come.
Okay, so then this puts us to the pub with Coach Beard and Coach Lasso. Coach Lasso brings out the anonymous suggestion box.
Oh, man.
And the way he shakes it and Beard rubs his hand, they're so excited.
Yeah.
And you're just, I don't know. Once again, my thought is these guys have been here. They know none of this is going to be good. They're not dumb.
Yeah.
They just know. But their enthusiasm for it is so great. So they open the box. They start going through the suggestions. And the majority of them are...
Wanker.
Wanker. And the lady that plays the pub...
The bartender.
Pub
tender.
No. It's not a pub tender.
I like pub
tender. It's
called
a...
Barmaid.
Oh,
they've
got a name. Oh, it's going to drive me mad. Anyways, so we're going to say solicitor. The solicitor at the pub, actually I think that's an attorney or a lawyer. They have
Barrister.
a name.
Barrister's
also an attorney. No, barrister's not right. All right, so let's move on from this before we show any more of our ignorance. She comes in and she says, Ted, you don't want him to call you a wanker. And he's like, what does a wanker mean? And she makes a lewd hand gesture. Yeah. And his line is, do you remember his line?
He's like, yeah. I was like, I'm more of a visual learner, so I appreciate that.
He's like, I'm a visual learner, so that's helpful.
Yeah.
So they're going through the suggestion boxes. It's all wanker. Ted says something like, one of them says, I hope you choke on a Big Mac. And Ted goes, well, I'm glad these are Beard goes, I'm glad these are anonymous. And Ted goes, no, Roy wrote his name on this one. So it says, I hope you choke on a Big Mac, Roy Kent. And Beard reacts, he goes, Roy. Like, he's like, there's like this, like, almost like, I don't know. He, like Roy is a disobedient child that he loves. He's like, Roy.
Well, I think they know. Like, they know they're going to win over Roy. So they're like, why would he do this? But again, I think they get it. And, like, it's subtle, but I would argue that's another, like, clown reference. There's, like, a Ronald McDonald,
wow.
like a clown kind of a thing. So I thought that was also kind of interesting, choke on a Big Mac, of all the things to choose.
Well, I thought that was just a common way that Americans go, is choking on a Big Mac. Anyways,
also true.
The one suggestion they get is that the shower water pressure is rubbish.
Yep.
And so Beard pockets that. That comes into play later.
I like that, though, because you could tell, like, they're like, okay, wanker. Like, these are just the stupid ones that we're not getting anything from. But they knew they're going to get something from it that they can do. It's a small thing, but they know they can do it. So the way Beard just puts that in his pocket.
He takes it serious.
Yeah, it's great.
And so then next thing they're walking back to work. They run into the same girl that's playing soccer. I think she, like, jukes Ted.
We don't have a name for this character. I'm assuming this character kind of comes back as much as they featured her in this episode.
She comes back and she has a name, but I mean, she's just like shown. We'll learn it later on, but at this point, we're not supposed to know who she is. So this brings us to Biscuits with the Boss Day 2, and we find that Rebecca Higgins is trying another biscuit, and then she's yelling at Higgins because he has brought her these biscuits and they are the wrong biscuits.
And he's holding the spit bucket, which is just fantastic.
So she tastes the biscuit and then she spits into
it's just like classic Higgins, just holding onto the spit bucket.
Right.
And I love the way it starts, too, because you see her with that biscuit, like, oh, she's going to have another biscuit. And she kind of gets that look on her face like she might like it, but then it's just immediate disgust. And then you realize it's Higgins trying to give it to her.
Right. And so then Ted shows up. He explains to her that, hey, everyone in the building is part of the team. And this is where like, he's establishing, hey, this is a team building thing. That's why he wants to meet with her in the morning. And he explains, I'm even meeting with Higgins for lunch. And Higgins is like, we're having salads in my office. And this leads to one of the best jokes, is Ted, they finish their conversation. Ted says, hey, Higgins, I'll see you later for lunch. He's exiting. He walks out the door, and do you remember what Higgins says?
Yeah, then Higgins says, and I missed this the first watch through. I just kind of said, why did this just happen? But Higgins gives him the Caesar you later, like a Caesar salad,
like a Caesar salad.
And because Ted loves that joke so much, he just barrels back into the room, and again, just some fantastic physical comedy. The way he barrels down that door, it makes me think they went through a couple doors doing that.
Oh yeah. Like, he hits that door so hard coming back through it, and then he just like points at Higgins, and he's like, yes. He's like Higgins, and you can tell Higgins likes Ted. Like Higgins has fallen into Ted's orbit and like likes him, and then Ted leaves, and Rebecca gives Higgins this look like, you piece of garbage, and Higgins immediately goes from loving Ted to, he's so intolerable.
Right.
Like just and. You just feel for Higgins, like.
Do you think like Ted's like the way he jumped back into that room is not only because he liked the joke, but do you feel like he now knows he kind of won Higgins over? Like, that was kind of I got Higgins.
Definitely,
he's in my orbit.
He's like Higgins is buying in. Higgins is probably Lasso level 1 at this point.
Yep.
He's reached 1.
Is that gonna be a recurring thing? We're gonna say where the characters are.
What level
at what level Lasso they are?
Well, I don't establish that. The Church of Lasso establishes that. And, I don't get that until I reach level 7. I'm a level 6. I could make conjectures.
Conjectures? You had it.
Yeah, sure. That was it. That's a word. I didn't make it up.
Conjectures.
And everyone knew what I meant.
Yep.
And so I have level 6 powers, but I can only kind of guess at what level people are.
Yeah.
Once you reach 7... then you get to...
You just know what they are.
You just know where they are. Yeah.
Fair.
So let's take a... ourselves in the locker room prior to the game, right?
Yes, so the big match.
Yeah, the big match, and they get Sam to leave the room because they found out, while they're in the pub, they talk about it's Sam's birthday. Mm-hmm. And so they've decided to pass around a box in the locker room for money to get Sam some gifts.
It seems kind of odd to do that, if I'm being honest, like passing around a box in a locker room asking for money for something. Like, if you want to get a guy a gift, get a guy a gift. And I don't know, I mean, we obviously find out later what they get him. Doesn't seem like it's a very pricey gift. So, like, why they're collecting money from everybody in there for that when, like, Ted could probably just get this gift or something. I don't know.
It's a team building thing, Tom.
Is it?
Well, this will explain our levels of Lasso.
Okay.
It's team building. What he's doing here is he's establishing, hey, guys, a member of our team has a birthday.
All right.
Let's all chip in collectively to get him something. So literally everyone's buying in to make Sam happy because Sam
what?
is
you
homesick.
Sold me. You sold me when you said literally everybody's buying in. All right, I'm in.
And listen, I've been asking you to go to auditing at the Church of Lasso for a long time. I feel like these are the things that you get. I mean, is it expensive? Yes. But once you get to level 6, you understand all these things.
Yeah.
So they pass around a collection box. Big thing here is that as it gets to Jamie Tart, because he is a jerk, a real tart,
real tart hole.
Okay, yeah, I like that, a tart hole. Sounds like turtle. He takes his chewing gum and he shoves it in the box, and it's Nate that's passing the box around. And so Nate doesn't know what to do. He essentially thanks him, Jamie, that's really kind, and then he moves on. And I like what Ted does here. Like, Ted confronts him, but he does it he doesn't do it in an angry way. He just walks over and he's like, hey, Jamie, did you just put gum in the collection box? Mm-hmm. Why did you do that? And I think it's very interesting, from a conflict resolution point. Some people do things and all it takes is someone to walk over and be like, hey, why did you do that? So that they literally have to reflect on, or at least they someone noticed that I am a tart hole. Yeah. I should probably not do that. And so Ted does the thing where he says, hey, we're all a team here. Nate's part of the team. We're just trying to do something for Sam. Mm-hmm. And then we see Jamie go into his analogy of what he thinks of this team, which is the band. So he equates them to the Rolling Stones, and I think we kind of mentioned it earlier. He's Mick Jagger. I think, Kent is Keith Richards because he's old. He's old, and everyone wonders why he's not dead, or everyone assumes he's already dead. And that's where, he says, I've got the move, or Jamie's like, I've got the moves. It's good neck movement. Yeah, you can do it. I can't. If I did it, I'd pull something. And that's when Ted makes the comment about the tiny waist. And really what Jamie's pointing out is that he's the star and everyone else is backup. And that Nate is essentially, I don't know if the Rolling Stones had backup dancers. I'm assuming they did. But I think he says Nate is someone that no one's ever heard of. Yeah. And so you just see that Jamie is a jerk, but Ted confronts him on it. And then after being confronted, Jamie acts contrite. And he's like, sorry, coach, I'll be better. I was just, having some fun. And then as soon as Ted walks away, Jamie makes the wanker hand motion. He does the reference, and then obviously Ted gets a glimpse of it through the reflection of a mirror or something they kind of had up there. Sure. But you can just tell how disingenuous Turt's comments are. That he is just saying this because he knows that's what Ted wants to hear. Right. And if he says that, Ted will leave. Right. And I think that's his kind of goal in that. I thought it was interesting that Ted saw it in the mirror and did not turn around and confront. Head, he just shook it off, and I guess he's picking his battles, which made sense to me. You brought up the Icon hat. I looked up the Icon hat. Icon hat on Amazon right now is $216. So Yikes. That hat is $216. Why? How much does your hat cost? This hat's $30. I think it's how much hats go for nowadays. My goodness, $30. What are you? Hats used to be $20 when we were kids. I can't believe I'm going to lose a $5 bet with you, and that's going to buy 1/6 of a hat. Yep. All right, so then we're at the press conference. That was after training. That was not before the game, because then we go into a press conference. Yeah. And Trent Krim, our favorite reporter, great hair, that hair, asks a question. before we get to Trent Krim, what I think is interesting is Ted is calling on reporters by name.
Yep.
He's like Marcus. He like knows their names, which once again, Ted's big on names. And the feeling I get, tell me if you got this, is that like the reporters are starting to like Ted. And it can't be more than a couple of days, but like he has gotten like, because they're asking him questions, he's answering them in like not necessarily serious ways. He's giving them answers, but they all laugh. Like everyone seems to be enjoying it as opposed to just being outraged by him. Did you get the sense that he was like winning over the press?
I think so. I mean, it's interesting to know like how long the press have been talking to him, because again, if Lasso's giving those little quips and stuff and he knows their names, like they can see that he's not your regular coach that they've been dealing with. Like the first coach we saw get sacked in the first episode, he wasn't treating the press like Ted is. So
sure.
I don't know if I necessarily got that
They
sense.
constantly see Liam and Noel.
Yeah.
Noah. That was his name.
Let's not regurgitate that conversation.
Regurgitate?
Yeah, I know. I was going to say.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that was the right words.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know, because again, he only really calls on Marcus. He calls on the other guy, with Trent.
Trent Krim of The Independent.
Yeah, but then he's got the other guy from The Sun who just kind of seems like a sleazeball, part of the tabloid or whatever.
Yeah,
so
that guy says, "I'm so and so from The Sun," and everyone in the room groans.
It's
it's great. Which they're like the TMZ of England, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
just
tabloid.
Yep.
Okay. What I think is funny is Trent Krim clearly trying to like trip Ted up. Because we find out that Trent is kind of after Ted, asks him to explain the offside rule, and Ted's response is, I'm going to quote the like 1964 Supreme Court when they defined pornography. It ain't easy to explain, but you know it when you see it.
Yep.
Which we don't need to go into the offside rule. I know what it is. I've watched football, but that was once again just a way that Trent is trying to trip up Ted. And Ted answers it in such a way that he gets laughs. Like the people accept it. And then the Sun reporter doesn't have a question for Ted. He's got a question for Rebecca, which is just rubbing in her face that her husband was having an affair like for the past 5 years while they were married. She did not know. That ends the press conference. We go to Rebecca's office where she's Googling this woman that the reporter brought up. And something Ted does so well, and like, once again, from a character standpoint, I'm trying to make the case from like Ted's outlook, like rather than like awkwardly shying away from that, like she's clearly upset by it. Rather than like giving her space, he literally goes into her office and he asks her, "Hey, like that was rough. Like, how are you? I'm sorry." And then he's brought the care package that he got from home, and he's kind of using that to make her feel better. And what I thought was interesting is he pulls a jar of barbecue sauce out, he tastes it, he makes a comment about, hey, is there like a food that brings you comfort? Or is there a food that like reminds you of home? And she does this thing where she looks at the biscuits that he's been bringing.
Yep.
Which makes you almost think is like, did she have, like, were biscuits something from her childhood or biscuits from, and then somehow Ted found that out? That'd be a lot of research by Ted. Yeah. But I think it's just showing like, oh, and when he walks in and she's Googling, she's eating the biscuits that he brought her, almost like a comfort food. Anyways, she looks at the biscuits and then she goes, no, like I don't have a comfort food. And then Jason Sudeikis just does a great job. He like looks at her, he looks at the biscuits, and you can just tell from the eyes. Like, nothing has to be said, just from the eyes that he recognizes, hey, she finds comfort in, this thing that I'm bringing, which I thought was very interesting.
And it's interesting to say that because obviously the episode does a lot of, like, the comfort foods. Like, with him and the barbecue sauce, with her and the biscuits, the upcoming gift to Sam, right? It's
Sam.
His birthday. Yeah, that's very interesting. They play with that on multiple levels, which I don't think I got even through the 2 watches I had. I like that.
What's your comfort food, Tom? Do you have a comfort food?
Taco Bell. Really, anything from Taco Bell's menu probably my favorite.
That's because when you were a young boy and your parents came home from, I don't know, working at the locomotive station, they would bring you Taco Bell. You would have been home all day alone.
I guess that's not. I mean, what's the definition of a comfort food? Just something you enjoy that brings you joy?
I guess I would think of it as something that brings you joy, but for some reason in my mind, I relate it to like childhood, something you had as a child. It's like the scene in Ratatouille where the food critic tries the food and like shoots him back to a childhood memory. I'm only bringing this up because I recently watched Ratatouille. Yeah, that's what I think of when I think of comfort food. So it's okay. Like,
what was yours?
I don't know that it's a comfort food, but there's my mom makes this clam dip. That is such a weird comfort food. But my mom always makes around the holidays, and then my dad does homemade Chex Mix. And so like I associate those two things with like a food that I've had like for years and years and years, but only at certain times and only with family.
My grandma used to make that, he called it dog food or puppy food or whatever, which was like Chex Mix.
Puppy chow.
Puppy chow? Yeah. You always call it just dog food.
Yeah.
It's like Chex Mix riddled with peanut butter, chocolate, and
covered in cocaine.
Sugar. Oh, delicious.
Oh, you guys did powdered sugar.
We did powdered sugar.
Oh, okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Different countries, different things. So then they go through that, and Ted, interesting. He's pulling out the things in his care package from his son. One of them's an army man. He sets it on her desk, and he's like, "Hey, this guy's here to protect you. My son sent it for me." And what I think is interesting is all these interactions, and we'll see it again with Sam, is like Ted is relating to these people by saying like, "Hey, I'm homesick too. I'm going through some things. This is why my son sent me a care package." Almost relating to like their challenges as well. And then he asks Rebecca, he's like, "Hey, the reason I came up here actually was to talk about Jamie Tart, trying to figure out what his like operating system is. How do I get to him? Trying to get him to buy into the team." And she has this realization that Ted needs to talk to Keeley. And really and I think she's establishing it there from like a subterfuge.
Good word.
That she is thinking, if I get those two together, because they have some sort of connection, my excuse is, hey, go talk to Keeley to learn about Jamie. But then we see some other things develop.
She knows exactly what she's doing with this.
Sure.
She's trying to get them together. We find out later that she's the one that hires the photographer that's going to be taking pictures of her when they're together at Keeley's modeling photo shoot here. So yeah, there's definitely wheel spinning.
As someone who's only seen first and second episode, what do you think of a romantic relationship between Keeley and Coach Theodore Lasso?
I think it's non-existent. I don't think they're
You don't think
romantic.
they have a connection? You don't think there's like some flirting that's going on?
I think they 100% have a connection, but in terms of like it being a romantic connection, I don't see it. Maybe, I don't know, like I can see maybe where Ted Lasso being away and being pushed away by his wife, maybe he does, but I don't know if I don't see that relationship as anything more than just friends.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'm by my reaction and my interesting that I said 4 times, I'm not going to tell you what that develops into. I'm clearly not foreshadowing or telegraphing anything at all.
Well, I will say.
Oh, no.
Interesting.
Good. Okay. So then this brings Ted to Keeley's model or her photo shoot where she is modeling. She's selling caffeinated vodka, which is great.
I love the green man, by the way, who's like, I guess, dubbing in for what's going to be later a CG lion. Yes. But I immediately think of like Always Sunny in Philadelphia and Charlie Day's character running around as green man. That's great.
Yeah. And so she is dressed as, I wouldn't even know she's a lion. She's in like a frilly dress. Her hair is all wild. But she lets us know that she chose lion as opposed to panda. We get a shot of the woman that's dressed as the panda, and she looks like she's got 2 black eyes, like someone punched her. And so, which is not necessarily funny, but it looks funny. And so then we have the conversation of, hey, what drives Jamie? She's... they go to get food, and so they're eating food, and Ted asks Keeley, hey, what motivates Jamie? And her first response is excellent, which is, we'll just say a sexual act.
Yes.
And then he pauses for a beat, and he goes, are there any other options?
Yeah.
Or...
That's not going to work for him. I don't think that's going to be Ted Lasso. That's not the Lasso way.
That's not the Lasso way. And so then she suggests positive reinforcement. They have a fun time talking. What I find so strange in this is that he is feeding her a hamburger, which... How often are you feeding women who you're not, I guess, in a marital relationship with? How often do you feed the woman that you're in a marital relationship with?
Well, I do think it's weird. So obviously, like the gag they try to do is because she's got these claws on, or she's got her nails long,
she can't
so
hold the burger.
She can't hold the burger.
What a weird food to choose, by the way.
Yeah, and so Ted is stepping in and
Like
holding the burger.
Nachos. It's
Yeah. It's an odd food.
Food.
So I get they're trying to do it, and they're trying to set it up so the photographer can take some like risque, if you will, pictures.
Right.
But it is goofy. Like, I'll feed my wife like maybe dessert or something like that if we're at a fancy restaurant.
Okay.
I might give her a bite, but yeah, I don't know if I would do that to a relative stranger. But again, to me, outside of looking in, I don't think this is sexual in any way. I don't think this is romantic in any way. This is just Ted being Ted, like, hey,
sure, just being helpful.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then she establishes that, hey, positive reinforcement works for Jamie, and Ted's like, hey, that's my wheelhouse. I'll give it a go. We depart there, and now we are in the locker room now before the match with Crystal Palace. And so once again, we asked Coach Beard what the scouting report is on Crystal Palace, and his response is
speed on the outside.
Speed on the outside. You heard the man. And then before the game, they do Sam's birthday. So they wheel out a little cart. Nate wheels it out. It's got a bunch of stuff for Sam. They say happy birthday. The whole team's involved, other than Jamie. Like, everyone's kind of in on Sam. They give him chin chin, which is, I had to look it up, it's a fried snack from West Africa. It apparently has the flavor of nutmeg. Do you have any idea what nutmeg?
I actually brought some chin chin. I didn't bring any chin chin.
Oh,
that would have been pretty sweet.
Didn't even, I don't know why I fell for that.
Did you actually?
You didn't even, yeah, I was like, oh, that would be great if you brought chin chin.
I didn't have any chin chin.
Everyone loves to listen to someone eat on a microphone. So yeah, I mean, we could have done the next, I don't know, I'm assuming this is going to take 2 more hours, eating these like crunchy chin chin.
Well, it'll be half Ted Lasso podcast, half ASMR podcast.
Oh man, is that what that means? Okay. I'm going to ask you what that means, ASMR off mic. The team claps for him. Sam's appreciative, and then Ted comes over and just says, hey, we wanted to get you something special. And they kind of bond. Ted's like, hey, I miss my son. I'm homesick. Sam's also homesick. I thought Sam was funny because he says this thing about, when I was a kid, my dad used to pinch my earlobes. Like, it's like a funny, not a funny, but something he remembers from, And they're having a moment, and you see Jamie like rolling his eyes. He just could not. He's like, they're having a touching moment, and then Jamie's like, you got to be kidding me. These 2 grown men are having a moment.
Which again says a lot about him. Like the fact that like these 2 grown men are having a moment, and he's likely never had that with another guy. Like that level of like just even basic interaction, talking about anything other than women or whatever he does. And
what's interesting, a callback to, so this was directed by Zach Braff, Bill Lawrence. One of the things I like about Scrubs, and what Scrubs was like never afraid to do, is JD and Turk, Donald Faison and Zach Braff, the 2 main characters, like are best friends, like 2 guys, like affectionate, like loving, weren't afraid to like share feelings. And so I think that's kind of a theme in like Bill Lawrence's world, is like, because a lot of time it's very masculine, and like you don't want to give off a vibe that people would think is, I guess, weird. I don't know. And so like one thing I think he does very well, and it's not surprising that Zach Braff directed this, is like 2 men like having a moment together, and having like a deep, sensitive moment. And so game time, I like how they do game time. Like game time starts, game time, and the announcers. Do you know who the announcers are?
It's Arlo is one of them. They're both famous British announcers.
Oh, are they? Okay, they're real. So they're not actors.
Yep, they're weird. Okay. They're real. They brought them in. The microphones.
They're real people.
They're real people. Yes.
They're real. So they didn't CGI those guys. Those are real people.
Real people.
Okay.
Can we talk very briefly about the microphones they used? Did you notice?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. It looked like the Darth. It looked like they were holding up the Darth Vader mouthpiece.
And I would imagine it's something, I didn't do research on this, but it seems like where they were, their press box, if you will, where they're doing the commentating is like right in there with the crowd. So I think some of it is to control the crowd noise in those small stadiums where it kind of covers the top. So they're literally holding it up to like their mustaches, and that's where they're kind of reading it through. But one thing I did want to ask, so he mentions it's Derby Day in London. Do you know what that means or what that's a reference to?
Derby Day?
It's Derby Day in London.
I'm assuming it's when the Kentucky Derby races.
It is spelled D-R-E-B-Y, but it's, I guess in English.
I stand by my answer then.
No, Derby is like an English term for kind of like a rivalry. So generally a derby is, at least the way I've heard it referred to a lot of the English Premier League games, is when teams that reside from like the same outskirts of like a major city play each other. So like when Tottenham plays Chelsea, because they're both out of like West London, they'll call that a derby.
Okay.
Or like when Manchester City plays Manchester United, they're both out of the city of Manchester, they call it a derby match. So assuming Richmond, I didn't look on a map, but assuming Richmond and Crystal Palace are relatively close, I'd imagine. So
for now on, anytime there's some sort of rivalry, I can use the term Derby Day.
Call it a derby, yep.
Okay, got it. Got it. Ted Lasso comes out onto the field. They're chanting wanker.
Everybody's favorite.
The announcers apologize for the fruity language, which is a great term. They're like, and we're off, and then it immediately cuts to the end of the game.
Wonderful.
Richmond, AFC Richmond has lost 1-4.
Mm-hmm.
And then, this is one thing I wanted to ask. Do soccer teams have mascots? Because there is clearly a mascot on that field, and he's like a big elephant, giant dog. I don't know what it is. I think they're greyhounds, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think at one point they call them like the dog pound or something like that, or they reference. I can't remember what the area is, but like as they're kind of coming in, I think a section of the stands is like the main supporters section or whatever.
Sure.
But yeah, a lot of them do. I think like Chelsea, the team that I follow. They're the Chelsea like Lions or Blue Lions or whatever, so they've got like a cute little lion mascot they have, and I think it's more for like kids' involvement and stuff into the.
Got it. Okay, so then we have them come into the locker room after the loss. The announcers make a comment about the only bright spot was the defensive play of Sam, who apparently turned it around because they sang him happy birthday. Jamie gets mad at the announcers because he scored a goal. And then they say something like, there was a consolation goal for Jamie during injury time.
Thank you!
And so he's just proud of himself that he scored a goal. And so, once again, you just see how selfish Jamie is in terms of, and the announcers, you don't hear it, but I listened to it with subtitles.
Yeah.
They make a comment about he celebrated, so after he made this consolation goal, he celebrated like he won the World Cup.
Yeah.
So they're down 4-1. And he celebrated for that, garbage time.
Yeah, they were already probably down 4-0. He gets a late goal just to kind of more or less boost his ego, which helps Ted in this upcoming conversation. But again, I love the way the show does this, is they're already showing Ted's effect. Like, Ted has shown interest in Sam and has helped Sam, connect to his past. And the announcers, as he's leaving, say, Sam had a great game. Sam did well. Kind of showcasing that if you can buy into this Lasso program, you don't have to be, and I don't know how good of a defender or player he is in this world, but all it takes is just some of that motivation or something being behind you, being part of a team, and you can be greater.
Yeah, and maybe it's less of Sam buying in and more just the positive effect of Ted caring about him, showing him that, hey, you have teammates, they care, it's your birthday, they all pitched in for this.
Yep.
No, that's a great point. So then locker room, Ted calls Jamie into his office adjacent to the locker room, and he kind of goes into, based on Keeley's background, he kind of leans into this positive reinforcement. He says, hey, you were one of the best athletes I've ever coached. You are truly great at everything that you do. And Jamie, you can tell, Jamie, he appreciates it, because I think he expects, I don't know, maybe that he's going to get, chewed out or something.
Right.
And so Jamie kind of straightens up. He responds to the compliment. And then Ted goes, the one thing is essentially, you know you're 1 in a million, and when you're out on that field, you forget that, you know, you're one of 11. You're part of a team. You're so focused on you. Which made me think that I don't actually know how many players are on a field during a soccer game.
There are 11, that is accurate.
So that's not just like players and bench players. There's 11 dudes running around on both sides.
Yep.
So during a soccer game, there are 22 people running around on that field.
Correct. 10 in play, goalie on each side. You got 22 men on the pitch.
That seems like a lot of dudes running around.
Well, technically
on
23
fields.
if you count the ref.
I don't. I don't count refs as real people.
How many
Come at us, refs.
And then they have 2 sideline refs.
How much reffing did you do as a kid?
I never did any repping. My
Oh,
brother
really?
did, but I never did.
Okay. So then he talks to him about that. Hey, if you can turn that, you know, from me to us, you'd be, you know, just incredibly excellent. And you kind of feel like Jamie's getting a little bit. And he does say, hey, that was a heck of a goal, by the way. So.
Well, and again, like for me, this is just classic Ted, and you could tell he's done this before. Like he realizes positive reinforcement is what this guy needs. I'm going to start this by saying something positive about the guy.
Sure.
I'm going to say in the middle, I'm going to say some kind of criticism, and I'm going to come back and say something positive. So
Sure.
you're kind of sneaking in the criticism into what he is, and it makes that much more powerful for the tart.
So you see it for the tart. I like. I'm going to acknowledge that you did great there. So you see it as essentially what we would call a compliment sandwich.
Oh yes, is that
Okay.
is that a term?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
You're not. You've never been fed a compliment sandwich. It's you did this really well, but this, and then, but you know, you did do this well. So you like.
I've gotten like the negative sandwich where it's like you did something decent in the middle, but you started off really bad, you ended really bad.
Oh, okay.
That's a sandwich.
Sometimes that sandwich is better for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Vegan. It's a vegan sandwich.
So then Roy comes in. Roy says, that was effing embarrassing. He's upset. He looks at Nate, and Nate responds so great. Nate goes, I am also livid. And then he throws his elbow, and he busts out the glass window on the door. And then he looks through it, and Lasso's like, what are you doing? And Nate's like, I don't know.
He's just like so dejected. It's so embarrassed he did that. Yeah.
And then Ted, in order to cheer up the team, they cut Sam's birthday cake. They hand it out. They turn on music. They're trying to, and essentially he's like, hey, forget about this loss. We'll get him on the next one. Let's have fun. Let's celebrate Sam. He goes up to Rebecca and Higgins. They're in Rebecca's office. He brings cake. He asks them, and he says, hey, it'd mean a lot to the players for you guys to come down and for them to know you're in their corner, even though it was a loss. And so Higgins joins. Rebecca does not. What I think is funny is Higgins is just like destroying cake, and he's dancing in the locker room, and everyone's enjoying it. And if you look, they cut to Nate. Nate is holding a roll of tape, and he has taped the glass window.
It's like masking tape, too.
It's like packing tape. Yeah, that brown packing tape.
Can we acknowledge, though, Higgins has got some moves?
Oh, Higgins has got great moves.
He's got, hey, would you say he has moves like Jagger?
No. He's not a Jagger, but he doesn't have that tiny waist. But you in the first episode were not hot on Higgins. Are you learning to love Higgins? Or is Higgins still just the yes man that you can't stand?
I don't know. I mean, I get what they're doing with his character. He's still a yes man. He still annoys me. But when he like branches out and he's not being that sniveling, conniving, just yes man to Rebecca, I think he's a fun and likable character. But I still don't. I still don't love his dynamic with Rebecca.
Sure. Okay. And then we have Roy Kent goes to the shower room. He turns on the water, and it's clearly got a lot more pressure than it did before. Funny, like physical gag bit is another player comes in, turns it on, and unsuspectingly is knocked over. And then Sam goes, the line is Gaffer fixed the water pressure or something like, and he calls everyone son, which I think is funny. He's like, careful son, the Gaffer fixed the water pressure. And so they depart, and now they're back at the village. What I think is so great, and it's probably taken me several watches to catch this, but as Coach Lasso and Beard separate on the street, and Coach Lasso goes to play soccer with the girl again. As Coach Beard's leaving, he shouts, "I hate losing."
Yeah.
Which there is a line from Moneyball where he says, "I hate losing more than I like winning." And as someone who hates losing, just like hates it in my core, whether or not it's card games or card games or card games, I hate losing. So when Coach Beard shouted that, I really felt for him.
No, that's funny because that was a good line, and I think it's a fair point because I think it hits people more than it does others, and you could tell Coach Beard is one of those very competitive people that a win's a win, and they kind of like expect to win. So
Sure.
when you get it, it's not as impactful, but it's like those hard fought losses and stuff. And especially as new coaches kind of coming in, you could tell Lasso probably let it roll off quicker than
Sure.
Beard would. Beard wanted to come in there and be successful right away.
Yeah, Ted from the very pilot episode was, hey, it's not about wins, losses, or ties.
Or ties.
He's just there for, the players themselves. And so then this brings us to Rebecca at home. She is watching the tabloid. She is watching the woman, and you can tell it's kind of like eating at her. And then she talks to Higgins on the phone. By the way, Rebecca has an iPhone, so I don't know if that establishes in an Apple show whether or not she's the good guy or the bad guy.
I wouldn't call her a villain.
Okay.
Like, it's villains they won't let her be.
So pro Rebecca and what she's doing to Ted.
I am not saying that.
That's what I heard. So
that's what Apple's saying.
that's true, with their product placement. So then we have Higgins and Rebecca. Higgins says, hey, I sent you over the photos. They're these paparazzi photos of Ted feeding Keely. Mm-hmm. She says something like the star player's girlfriend, cozying up to the coach. That's going to, play hell on the team, play hell on Coach Lasso's reputation. Mm-hmm. And Higgins even points out, he goes, the press are going to crush them. Are you sure you want to release these pictures? And once again, Bill Lawrence, Zach Braff, just from the writing, like the music that's playing, the way that it's cut, the way she's acting, you can just tell, like, you're kind of like, is she going to turn?
That's what I was going to ask you, because she's just staring at the little army man, and
the army man that Ted gave her,
yeah,
right?
And we're already kind of seeing, like, that she is, intimidated is not the right word, but she can see the Ted Lasso effect and what he has on other people and kind of what it's doing to her.
Sure, yeah.
So this is kind of that moment, like, do I let this man, who I think she thinks this, can turn this team around at this point, even this early on, but she gets that glimpse of the hot model chick or whatever that the new husband is going after, or I guess has been with for a long time,
sure, yeah,
and it just triggers that back into her, and she's like, no, my hatred for this man, my former husband, is stronger than Ted in that relationship,
right.
And she decides to pull the trigger and make it so.
Yeah, I think it's probably less about like what he's doing to the team, and it's more about what he's doing to her in
True.
terms of like the friendship he's trying to, like the fact that he is, he cares for her, mm-hmm. despite her being cold and, uncaring towards him. The fact that he asked after the reporter got after her, he's asking how she's doing. He gave a gift that his son gave to him, mm-hmm. To her. There's that moment. But then she throws the soldier. She says, hey, send him to the press.
She's just going to step on it later and be mad.
Right.
Like, who's cleaning that up?
Who leaves an army man? Have you ever stepped on a Lego? Have you ever stepped on an army man? Especially it was like tile. It's not like it was in carpet or anything. So... they send it to the press, and also cut within this scene, we find out where the biscuits come from.
It's just so great.
And where do the biscuits come from?
They're Ted's homemade recipe, apparently.
Was it telegraphed enough in the show that you thought he was the one making them?
It was a complete surprise to me.
Oh, really?
It
okay.
100% was. And I think what sold it was little pink boxes. I felt like those little pink boxes made it seem like more professional, and like that he did buy them from like a local shop and then was bringing them. So the fact that he went that extra level, got the little boxes. I love the little bit where he puts a little bobblehead of the queen on top of them to kind of keep them closed or whatever.
Right.
Really good. And again, just a fantastic reveal that continues just to show how much this character cares about other people, even people that don't show him that same love and respect.
Right, and that's a big theme for this is him like trying to get to know people, caring about people, even though they may not care for him. Mm-hmm. He is not aggressive, but like persistent.
Yes,
like,
persistence is a great word.
I'm gonna win these people over despite how they treat me. I am going to care for them and try and help them out. And then you see just from like a team building, trying to get everyone caring about one another, caring about Sam's birthday, like everyone contributing. And you just see kind of Ted's outlook and how that is having an effect on Higgins, Sam.
Right.
And the other thing I want to mention is Bill Lawrence, Zach Braff. They did it in Scrubs, and they're doing it here. They do so well with like the music. I don't know what that song is. I've got to look it up. There's like a song that plays while she's deciding whether or not to send the photos. And they just do such a good job of like the music conveying the feeling and like, I don't know. So enjoyed this episode a lot. Once again, established a lot deeper connection with these people than the pilot episode.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see like the transformation that's taking place. The thing I don't think we got a ton of is the Beard and Coach Lasso. There was some interaction.
Well, I think they used the pilot to establish that relationship,
Sure.
and I'm sure we'll get plenty more, because again, just the little walk and talks that they do are great when they're going through the park and doing the other walk and talk about the books and all that stuff. But I think you needed Ted to branch out. You understand that relationship. You needed Ted to branch out and start establishing these with some of these other characters. And I'm, again, as somebody's only seen the first 2 episodes, I'm very excited to see where we go from here, because I think there's a lot of interesting interwoven things that they've probably been kind of laying the groundwork for. See what happens.
I mean, that main thing of will Ted and Keeley fall in love? Will they get married? Will they have babies? That's essentially what I think we're all wondering, right?
Yeah, find out next week. Same bat time.
They'll probably do a fast forward, and that's what we'll find out in episode 3. Anyways, we have taken too much time, but we've enjoyed this. I have enjoyed this. I am Julian, and you are...
And I'm Tom. Thanks for tuning in with Team Binge. See you next time.
From the Believe a Ted Lasso podcast.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you for episode 3, which is called...
Biscuits and Gravy.
Yeah, Biscuits and Gravy. That's exactly right. All right, bye, guys.